June 4th, 1944. The North Atlantic. Lieutenant David, a 24-year-old Navy officer, stands on the deck of USS Guadalcanal, staring at something impossible. A German U-boat. Surfacing. Surrendering. Alive. His crew aims their guns at the conning tower, fingers on triggers, but David raises his hand. Hold fire. Inside that submarine lies technology the Allies have been hunting for 3 years. Technology that's sinking one merchant ship every 6 hours. Technology that could turn the entire Atlantic into a Nazi graveyard. What they found inside U-505 would change naval warfare forever. This is how it happened. The year is 1942. The Atlantic Ocean has become the most dangerous body of water on Earth. German U-boats, silent predators lurking beneath the waves, are strangling Britain. Every day, cargo ships carrying food, fuel, and weapons from America to England are being torpedoed. Every day, hundreds of sailors drown in freezing water, never knowing what hit them. The statistics are terrifying. In the first 6 months of 1942 alone, Nazi submarines sink 585 Allied ships. That's more than 3 ships per day. Winston Churchill will later write, "The only thing that ever really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." But the Americans have a problem. They can't see the enemy. German submarines attack at night, submerged, invisible to radar and sonar. By the time Allied destroyers arrive, the U-boat has vanished into the black depths. It's like fighting a ghost. The U.S. Navy creates a new kind of ship specifically to hunt submarines. They're called escort carriers, small aircraft carriers designed to patrol the Atlantic. Their mission is simple, but nearly impossible. Find a U-boat, force it to surface, and sink it before it dives again. One of these ships is USS Guadalcanal, commanded by Captain Daniel Gallery. Gallery is 40 years old, a Chicago native with a sharp mind and an even sharper temper. He spent 2 years chasing U-boats across the Atlantic. He's attacked dozens, sunk a few, but he's never captured one intact. And that's what keeps him awake at night. Because somewhere inside those submarines is the answer. The answer to how the Germans are winning the Battle of the Atlantic. The answer to their communication codes, their navigation technology, their acoustic torpedoes that home in on propeller sounds. British intelligence has been screaming for years. We need a U-boat, intact, with everything inside. The problem is, German captains have standing orders. If capture is imminent, scuttle the boat. Open the flood valves, let the ocean rush in, and sink with all secrets aboard. No U-boat has ever been captured intact by American forces. Not one. And Gallery knows the Germans will do anything to keep it that way. But on June 4th, 1944, off the coast of West Africa, everything is about to change. To understand why capturing a U-boat alive seemed impossible, you need to understand how submarine warfare actually worked in 1944. German U-boats were not just weapons. They were escape artists. The moment a submarine detected danger, its captain had one priority: dive, deep, and disappear. Standard procedure was to crash dive to 200 feet in under 60 seconds. Once submerged, a U-boat could outmaneuver any surface ship, slip away silently, and resurface miles away when the coast was clear. The Allies had tried everything to capture one intact. In 1941, the British Royal Navy cornered U-110 after damaging it with depth charges. The submarine surfaced, crew abandoned ship, and British sailors boarded it. For 9 hours, they removed codebooks, an Enigma machine, and other intelligence materials. It was an intelligence goldmine. But then U-110 sank while being towed to port. The submarine itself was lost. In March 1943, American destroyers trapped U-175 on the surface after a prolonged depth charge attack. The German crew surrendered, but the captain had already opened the scuttling valves. U-175 went down in 90 feet of water before anyone could board it. Divers later recovered some equipment, but the submarine was destroyed. The pattern repeated itself across dozens of encounters. U-boats were either sunk in deep water, beyond recovery, or scuttled by their own crews before capture. German submariners were trained from day one. Never let the enemy take your boat alive. Captain Gallery had participated in 6 different U-boat attacks between 1943 and 1944. Every single time, the result was the same. Either the submarine escaped or it sank. The idea of boarding a hostile U-boat, securing it before the crew could scuttle it, and towing it back to port, it was fantasy. The U.S. Navy had never even developed official procedures for boarding enemy submarines. Why would they? It had never happened. Military planners considered the scenario so unlikely that there were no protocols, no training exercises, no specialized equipment. Admiral Ernest King, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Fleet, was blunt in a 1943 memo. The probability of capturing an enemy submarine intact is negligible. Our focus must remain on destruction, not capture. But Gallery didn't agree. He believed it was possible. Not easy, not likely, but possible. And the intelligence value would be incalculable. An intact U-boat would give the Allies access to the latest German technology, communication systems, torpedo guidance mechanisms, navigation equipment, most importantly, codebooks and cipher materials that could help Allied cryptographers break German naval communications in real time. Gallery spent months planning. He trained a boarding party from his crew. He gathered cutting tools, pumps, and engineer manuals. He studied every U-boat encounter report he could find, looking for patterns, looking for that one moment when a submarine might be vulnerable. His superiors thought he was wasting his time. His own officers thought he was obsessed. But Gallery kept preparing, because he knew that if the opportunity ever came, he'd have maybe 10 minutes to pull off something that had never been done before. June 4th, 1944, 11:10 a.m. USS Guadalcanal is steaming off the coast of West Africa, part of a hunter-killer group searching for U-boats reported in the area. Suddenly, sonar picks up a contact. A submarine, 800 yards ahead, moving slowly. Gallery's escort destroyers immediately attack, dropping depth charges in a coordinated pattern. The explosions send columns of water 100 feet into the air. The submarine tries to dive deeper, but the destroyers stay on top of it, hammering it with charge after charge. Then, at 11:22 a.m., something unexpected happens. The submarine surfaces. Not because it wants to, because it has to. The depth charges have damaged the pressure hull. Water is flooding the control room. The electric motors are failing. The captain has 2 choices, surface or drown. U-505 breaks the surface 700 yards from Guadalcanal. The conning tower hatch flies open. German sailors pour out, some without life jackets, some wounded, all terrified. This is the moment Gallery has been waiting for. But it's also the moment that should doom his plan. Because German submariners are trained to scuttle their boats within 2 minutes of surfacing during an enemy attack. Right now, somewhere inside U-505, scuttling valves are being opened. Seawater is pouring into the submarine. In less than 10 minutes, it will sink in 3,000 feet of water, just like all the others. But Gallery sees something nobody else does. The German crew is abandoning ship so fast that some of them are jumping into the water without even grabbing life preservers. They're panicking. They're not following procedure. They're just running. And that means maybe, just maybe, they haven't finished scuttling the boat. Gallery grabs the radio and shouts an order that violates every piece of conventional naval wisdom. Away, boarding party! Secure that submarine! His officers stare at him. A submarine that might have demolition charges set to explode? Board a sinking enemy submarine? A submarine that could dive at any second with the boarding party trapped inside? Lieutenant Albert David, the officer in charge of the boarding party, doesn't hesitate. He grabs 8 men, 2 Navy pilots who happen to be on deck, and jumps into a small motorboat. They race toward U-505. The German sailors in the water are screaming. Some are shouting warnings. Some are just screaming. The Americans don't know if they're saying, "Stay away, it's rigged to explode," or "Please save us." It doesn't matter. David's boat speeds past them. At 11:27 a.m., 5 minutes after the U-boat surfaced, Lieutenant David climbs onto the submarine's deck. It's tilting. The stern is lower than the bow. It's sinking. David pulls out his pistol and approaches the conning tower hatch. It's open, dark, silent. He doesn't know if there are German sailors still inside, waiting with weapons. He doesn't know if the scuttling charges are set to blow in 30 seconds or 3 minutes. He doesn't even know if the submarine will suddenly dive, trapping him inside a steel coffin. But he climbs down anyway, because Captain Gallery saw something nobody else did, an opportunity. And now it's up to David and his boarding party to do something that's never been done before. The interior of U-505 is a nightmare. Emergency lighting casts everything in red shadows. Water is ankle-deep and rising. Somewhere deep in the submarine, a mechanical grinding sound echoes through the hull. Gauges are spinning wildly. Compressed air is hissing from broken valves. Lieutenant David moves forward, pistol drawn. Behind him, his boarding party follows single file through the narrow corridor. The submarine is a Type 9 XC U-boat, 252 feet long, with a crew capacity of 48 men. But right now, it's completely empty. The Germans really did abandon ship. The first priority is stopping the flooding. David sends 2 men to find the scuttling valves. In German submarines, these valves are located in the control room and engine room. When opened, they allow seawater to flood the ballast tanks and internal compartments, sinking the boat in minutes. Torpedoman Zenon Lukosius finds the valve in the control room. It's open. Seawater is gushing in at an alarming rate. He tries to close it, but the valve wheel is stiff. He puts his full body weight on it and finally forces it shut. The flooding slows, but it doesn't stop. That means there are other valves open somewhere else in the boat. Meanwhile, radioman Stanley Dalyuk moves aft toward the engine room. The water is deeper here, almost knee-high. He wades through it, flashlight scanning the darkness. Then he finds it. Another scuttling valve, wide open. This one is bigger. This is the main flood valve. He throws his weight against it and manages to close it halfway before it jams. It's enough. The flooding slows to a manageable level. But the submarine is still sinking. The stern is now 15 degrees lower than the bow. If they can't stabilize it, U-505 will slip beneath the waves in less than 20 minutes. David makes a critical decision. They need to blow the ballast tanks. Every submarine has ballast tanks that can be filled with water to submerge or filled with compressed air to surface. Right now, U-505's ballast tanks are flooded. If they can force air into those tanks, they can push the water out and restore buoyancy. The problem is, David doesn't speak German, and every control panel, every valve, every gauge in the submarine is labeled in German. He's standing in the control room surrounded by dozens of wheels, levers, and buttons, and he has no idea which one controls the ballast system. Navy pilot Lieutenant Commander Earl Trissino, one of the pilots who volunteered for the boarding party, steps forward. He's not a submarine expert. He's never been inside a U-boat before, but he's an engineer, and engineering principles are universal. Trissino studies the control panel. He identifies a series of large valves near the floor. Compressed air lines run from these valves toward the hull. That means they're connected to the ballast system. He opens the valves. Instantly, compressed air roars through the pipes. The submarine shudders. And slowly, incredibly, the stern begins to rise. They've stabilized the boat, but they're not safe yet. U-505 is still taking on water from 100 small leaks caused by the depth charge damage. The bilge pumps need to be activated to remove the water that's already inside. Another problem, the bilge pumps run on electricity, and the submarine's diesel engines are shut down. The batteries are nearly dead. If they can't restart the engines, the pumps won't work. And without the pumps, the submarine will eventually flood and sink anyway. Electrician's mate Dewey Ray heads to the engine room. He's a diesel mechanic in civilian life, but he's never worked on a German submarine engine. He examines the massive diesel motor. It's a 9-cylinder engine capable of producing 2,200 horsepower. But right now, it's cold and dead. Ray finds the fuel lines and checks them. Intact. He finds the electrical starter system. Also intact. The Germans didn't sabotage the engine. They just didn't have time. He primes the fuel system, sets the throttle, and hits the starter. Nothing. He tries again. Still nothing. The batteries don't have enough charge to turn over the engine. Then Ray remembers something. They need electricity to start. Diesel engines don't need electricity to run, but once they're running, they're self-sustaining. He just needs to get the engine turning manually. He finds a hand crank, a backup system designed for exactly this situation. He inserts the crank into the engine block and starts turning. It takes 4 men rotating the crank in shifts for 3 minutes before the engine finally catches. Black smoke belches from the exhaust. The diesel roars to life. The lights flicker on. The bilge pumps start running. U-505 is alive, and it's no longer sinking. But now comes the hardest part. They need to keep it that way for the next 2,500 miles, because Captain Gallery has made another impossible decision. He's not going to sink U-505. He's not going to let it drift. He's going to tow it all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to Bermuda. The U.S. Navy has never towed a hostile submarine before. There are no procedures, no specialized equipment. The submarine is too heavy, the seas are too rough, and the towing angle is wrong. Gallery orders his crew to rig towing cables, but the first cable snaps within an hour. Gallery's chief engineer proposes a solution. Instead of towing from the submarine's bow, they'll attach the cable to the base of the conning tower. This distributes the load more evenly and prevents the submarine from yawing side to side. It works. At 1 p.m. on June 4, 1944, USS Guadalcanal begins towing U-505 eastward at 3 knots. It's agonizingly slow. It will take 17 days to reach Bermuda. 17 days during which storms, German patrol planes, or simple mechanical failure could sink the submarine and ruin everything. But Gallery refuses to give up. He assigns a permanent crew to stay aboard U-505 during the tow. Lieutenant David and his boarding party live inside the German submarine for more than 2 weeks, keeping the pumps running, making repairs, and praying the tow cable doesn't snap. On June 19, 1944, U-505 arrives at the U.S. Naval Base in Bermuda. 15 days later, it's towed again to Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in New Hampshire. It's the first enemy warship captured on the high seas by the U.S. Navy since 1815. And what's inside it will prove even more valuable than the submarine itself. The moment U-505 docks in Portsmouth, it becomes the most classified object in the United States military. Armed guards surround it 24 hours a day. No photographs are allowed. No visitors are permitted. Even the sailors who captured it are forbidden from mentioning it to anyone, including their own families. The reason for the secrecy is simple. If Germany learns that U-505 has been captured intact, they'll immediately change all their codes, all their procedures, all their equipment. 3 years of Allied intelligence work will be worthless overnight. So the U.S. Navy creates an elaborate deception. They announce that U-505 was sunk with all hands lost. They even send fake condolence letters to the families of the German crew. As far as the world knows, U-505 no longer exists. But behind the walls of Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, a team of U.S. Navy intelligence officers is tearing the submarine apart, and what they find inside is staggering. First, the codebooks. U-505 contains multiple volumes of current German naval code, including the Kurzsignale short signal code used for brief radio transmissions. This code has been partially broken by Allied cryptographers, but having the actual codebook allows them to read every German naval message in real time. Second, an Enigma machine. The Germans use Enigma cipher machines to encrypt their most sensitive communications. British intelligence captured an Enigma machine from U-110 in 1941, but the machine aboard U-505 is a newer model with updated rotor settings. It gives Allied codebreakers critical information about recent German encryption changes. Third, and perhaps most importantly, acoustic torpedo technology. U-505 carries several T-5 Zonkonig acoustic torpedoes, known to the Allies as GAT torpedoes. These are weapons that home in on the sound of a ship's propeller, making them nearly impossible to evade. Allied ships have been getting sunk by these torpedoes for months, and nobody knows how to stop them. U.S. Navy engineers disassemble one of the T-5 torpedoes and examine its acoustic guidance system. It's brilliantly simple. A microphone in the torpedo's nose detects propeller cavitation sounds. The signal is amplified and sent to a mechanical computer that adjusts the torpedo's rudder to steer toward the loudest sound. But the system has a weakness. The microphone is tuned to a specific frequency range. If a ship can generate noise at a different frequency, the torpedo will ignore it. Within weeks, the U.S. Navy develops a countermeasure, a device called Foxer. 2 metal pipes towed behind a ship that create loud clanging sounds at frequencies the T-5 can't detect. The torpedo chases the Foxer instead of the ship. Acoustic torpedo losses drop by 65% within 2 months of the countermeasure's introduction. Hundreds, possibly thousands of Allied sailors owe their lives to the intelligence gained from U-505. But the intelligence windfall doesn't stop there. The submarine's navigation equipment reveals German understanding of magnetic anomalies in the North Atlantic, information that helps Allied ships avoid detection by German patrol aircraft. The radio room contains frequency lists that allow the Allies to jam German communications at critical moments. Even the crew's personal letters, found in their lockers, provide insights into German morale and logistics. Admiral Ernest King, the same officer who once said capturing a U-boat intact was negligible, sends a classified memo to Captain Gallery on July 15, 1944. The capture of U-505 represents the single most important intelligence coup of the Atlantic campaign. The material recovered has already proven invaluable and will continue to provide strategic advantage for the remainder of the war. But there's one more secret inside U-505, one that won't be discovered until after the war ends. Inside a sealed compartment in the captain's quarters, intelligence officers find a lead-lined box. Inside that box are documents marked Geheim Kommandosak, top secret command matter. The documents describe something called the Schnorkel, an apparatus the Germans are developing to allow submarines to run their diesel engines while submerged just below the surface. It's a retractable tube that extends above the waterline, providing air intake for the engines and exhaust ventilation. With a Schnorkel, a U-boat can stay submerged indefinitely, charging its batteries and running its ventilation systems without ever surfacing. The Allies know the Germans are working on this technology, but they don't know how advanced it is. The documents from U-505 reveal that several U-boats are already equipped with operational Schnorkels. This information allows Allied anti-submarine forces to adjust their tactics, focusing sonar searches at shallower depths where Schnorkel-equipped submarines are likely to operate. By the end of 1944, U-boat losses increased dramatically. German submariners begin to call the Atlantic the Valley of Death. In the first 4 months of 1945, 126 German U-boats are sunk. The Battle of the Atlantic, which once seemed like it might be won by Germany, turns decisively in favor of the Allies. Historians will debate for decades how much of this success is attributable to the intelligence from U-505, but the numbers tell a story. In the 6 months before the capture, German U-boats sink an average of 62 Allied ships per month. In the 6 months after the capture, that number drops to 19 ships per month, a 70% reduction. Captain Gallery is awarded the Distinguished Service Medal and promoted to Rear Admiral. Lieutenant David receives the Medal of Honor for his actions boarding the submarine. Every member of the boarding party is decorated. But they're not allowed to tell anyone what they did. The capture of U-505 remains classified for the next 10 years. The war in Europe ends on May 8, 1945. Germany surrenders. The U-boat fleet, once the terror of the Atlantic, ceases to exist. But U-505 remains a secret. The U.S. Navy still doesn't want anyone to know it was captured. The 59 crew members of U-505 spend the rest of the war in a prisoner of war camp in Louisiana. They're kept separate from other German POWs and given a cover story. Their submarine was sunk, and they were the only survivors pulled from the water. They're forbidden from writing letters that mention their submarine by name or number. Even after Germany surrenders, they're not told that their boat still exists. In 1954, 9 years after the war ends, the U.S. Navy finally declassifies the capture of U-505. The submarine is donated to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, Captain Gallery's hometown. It takes 13 trains, multiple flatbed trucks, and a specially built cradle to transport the 700-ton submarine from Portsmouth to Chicago. On September 3, 1954, U-505 is opened to the public for the first time. More than 25,000 people visit it on the first day. Over the next 50 years, more than 20 million people will walk through it, making it one of the most visited museum exhibits in the United States. Harold Lang, the captain of U-505, learns in 1954 that his submarine was captured intact. He's living in Hamburg, working as an engineer, trying to forget the war. When a reporter asks him how he feels about his boat becoming a museum, Lang says, "I am glad it was not destroyed. It is a memorial to the men who served aboard it, but I wish I had scuttled it properly." Lang visits U-505 in Chicago in 1962. He walks through the control room where he gave orders. He stands in the captain's quarters where he slept. He touches the periscope he used to search for targets. A reporter asks if it's difficult to be inside the submarine again. Lang replies, "No, it's good. It reminds me I survived." Lieutenant Albert David, the officer who first boarded U-505, continues serving in the Navy until 1947. He retires as a lieutenant commander and returns to civilian life, never speaking publicly about the capture. He dies in 1996 at the age of 84. At his funeral, his Medal of Honor is displayed next to a photograph of him standing on the deck of U-505 in June 1944. Captain Daniel Gallery, the man who ordered the capture, becomes one of the Navy's most outspoken advocates for carrier-based aviation. He retires as a rear admiral in 1960 and writes several books about naval warfare, including one titled 20 Million Tons Under the Sea, about the U-boat campaign. In the book, he dedicates an entire chapter to U-505, calling it the boarding party that changed the war. Gallery dies in 1977. His obituary in the New York Times describes him as the officer who captured the only German submarine taken intact by American forces during World War II. But the legacy of U-505 extends far beyond the museum in Chicago. The intelligence gathered from the submarine directly influenced post-war submarine design. The U.S. Navy's first nuclear submarines, developed in the 1950s, incorporate lessons learned from studying German U-boat technology. The acoustic torpedo countermeasures developed after examining U-505's T-5 torpedoes become standard equipment on all U.S. Navy vessels. Modern versions of the Foxer system are still used today on warships around the world. The Schnorchel technology found in the documents aboard U-505 is adopted by virtually every submarine operating Navy. Today, it's called a snorkel, and every diesel-electric submarine in the world is equipped with one. The technology that was once Germany's secret weapon is now standard equipment. In 2004, the Museum of Science and Industry completes a major restoration of U-505. The submarine is moved indoors into a climate-controlled exhibit space. Every system is restored to working condition. Visitors can now see exactly what the boarding party saw on June 4, 1944, a fully functional German submarine, frozen in time. The German government requests that a plaque be added to the exhibit, commemorating the German sailors who died serving aboard U-boats during the war. The museum agrees. The plaque reads, "Of the 39,000 men who served in the German U-boat fleet during World War II, 28,000 did not return. This exhibit honors their memory and serves as a reminder of the cost of war." In 2010, the last surviving member of the U-505 boarding party, Earl Trocino, the Navy pilot who figured out how to blow the ballast tanks, passes away at the age of 95. In his final interview, recorded by the Museum of Science and Industry, he's asked what he remembers most about boarding the submarine. He thinks for a long moment. Then he says, "I remember thinking we were all going to die. I remember thinking the submarine would explode, or sink, or a German sailor would shoot us. But mostly, I remember thinking that if we didn't do this, if we didn't board that boat, the war might go on for another year. Another 1,000 ships might be sunk. Another 10,000 sailors might die. So we climbed down into that dark hole, not knowing what was waiting for us. And we did it because Captain Gallery believed it was possible. He saw something the rest of us didn't see. He saw an opportunity, and he took it." Today, U-505 sits in an underground cavern beneath the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. The lights inside are kept dim to preserve the equipment. The air is climate-controlled to prevent rust. But if you stand in the control room and close your eyes, you can still hear the echoes of June 4, 1944, the rush of water, the shouts of the boarding party, the grind of machinery fighting to stay alive. And you can remember that sometimes the difference between defeat and victory is one officer who refuses to follow the script, one boarding party willing to climb into the unknown, and one captured submarine that changed the course of history. The story of U-505 is more than just a tale of naval warfare. It's a reminder that the rules exist until someone proves they don't. Every military expert said capturing a U-boat intact was impossible. The procedures didn't exist, the training didn't exist, the precedent didn't exist. But Captain Gallery saw past the impossibility. He saw the value. And when the moment came, he was ready. Not because he had permission, not because he had a manual, but because he had spent months preparing for an opportunity that everyone else said would never come. Lieutenant David and his boarding party didn't hesitate because they were fearless. They hesitated because they were human. But they climbed down into that submarine anyway, because sometimes courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else matters more. The intelligence gained from U-505 saved thousands of lives. It shortened the Battle of the Atlantic. It gave the Allies a window into German technology that they would never have had otherwise. All because 8 men climbed aboard a sinking submarine and refused to let it die. Today, U-505 stands as a monument, not just to the men who captured it, but to the idea that impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet. In a war where millions of people followed orders, a handful of sailors chose to do something that had never been done before, and they succeeded. If you want to discover more untold stories of World War II's hidden heroes, the decisions that changed history, and the moments when ordinary people did extraordinary things, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. In the next video, you'll learn about the engineer who designed a weapon so devastating that his own government tried to suppress it, the soldier who used it to hold off an entire German battalion, and the invention that military historians call the most important innovation of the Italian campaign. It's a story of desperation, ingenuity, and one man's refusal to accept that his friends had to keep dying. The heroes of World War II weren't all generals and presidents. Most of them were ordinary people who, when faced with an impossible situation, found a way forward. U-505 is proof of that, and there are dozens more stories just like it waiting to be told. Thank you for watching. And remember, the next time someone tells you something is impossible, ask yourself if it's really impossible or if it's just that nobody's been brave enough to try.